Hello! Welcome back, maybe, or welcome here, or something. It's been a minute since I filmed a video. I was supposed to have a friend come visit, so I spent every waking moment cleaning my apartment. He bailed. So there was that. And then I went to Anime North in Toronto. I'm not a huge anime fan, but I just wanted to go to a convention. It was my first convention ever. And I dressed up as Misty from Pokemon on Friday and dressed up as Major from Ghost in the Shell on Saturday. And yeah, the whole thing was really fun. So it didn't leave a lot of room for filming and editing, but I'm back now. I'm hoping to go to more conventions this summer, so we shall see. Let's talk about Panelathon. It was a readathon that went on for about a week, I think, and it was all about reading comics and mangas and graphic novels. And this is a world that I'm just dipping my toe into. I'm really not that immersed in it. I don't know that much about it. So I wanted to take part and kind of grow my experience with it, I guess. Anime North was right in the middle of Panelathon, so unfortunately I didn't get as much read as I wanted to, but I still got some shit read. There was a bunch of challenges. In the first challenge, it was to read one graphic novel, one manga, and one comic. I actually completed this challenge. For graphic novel, I read The Milkman Murders, which was about a wife who had kind of a really shitty family. Her husband was abusive and on drugs, and her son was killing the neighborhood pets, and her daughter was sleeping with her teachers over and over again. This was just a thing she did. And then something happens to the wife and she kind of snaps and shit gets real. I really enjoyed this one. It was a very ugly art style, but it fit the very ugly story. It was very graphic and very dark, but I enjoy very dark things, so that was great. I actually would love if this was a movie. I feel like this would make such a good movie. And it was just kind of a dark take on a suburban housewife tale. It made me uncomfortable in parts, but in a good way. For comics, I read more of the Walking Dead series. I'm now up to volume 28 in the Walking Dead series. I'm still really enjoying the series. I'm actually enjoying it more now than I was. There was a bit where I really wasn't enjoying it because it was so similar to the show, and I had just watched that part of the show and I hadn't enjoyed it, so reading it in comics was annoying and nothing was surprising. I'm actually 2 seasons behind in the show, maybe just 1 season. I don't fucking know. But anyways, I kind of stopped watching the show for a while, so it's nice to now be farther ahead in the comics where everything is surprising me. And I actually really like it. I like the time jump. I like that it feels like a lot higher stakes. And it feels like the choices that they're making right now make sense. I understand why they're not just going full charge ahead, because they do have this settlement now and their utopia kind of figured out. And so they don't want to risk all that. And yeah, I don't know. I just really like it and it feels more grounded and I'm enjoying it. And then for manga, I read A Silent Voice, which I really loved. Actually, the entire time I was at Anime North, I was searching for the second volume in A Silent Voice because I enjoyed it that much that I just immediately wanted to buy the second one. And I did find it, but not for a price I was willing to pay because I only had so much money to spend, and I ended up spending it all on board games and movie posters and food. A Silent Voice is from the perspective of this, or at least volume 1 was from the perspective of this boy who ends up kind of bullying this girl who's deaf and new to their school, and the whole thing was just kind of sad. And then he also ends up getting bullied, and I don't know, there was just so many complex layers to it being about how kids view things, and it being about the way that disabled people get mistreated, and the things that they go through in their daily life, and also about male rage and about how labels kind of stick with kids and define kids going forward. I don't know, I just found the whole thing really interesting, and I'm so looking forward to seeing where the story goes, because that was only volume 1, and I'm pretty sure there's like 7 volumes in this. So I'm really excited to read more of that. That was my first manga I've ever read, and yeah, it went well. Although it was confusing as hell, because then afterwards, every time I picked up a comic, I was reading it the wrong way. So that's something to get used to. For a smaller comic, I read Teenage Wasteland, which I guess was a Comixology exclusive. I read all my shit on Comixology because I live in the middle of nowhere, so I can't just like go to a comic shop and pick up stuff. It's about these kids who are kind of made like the protectors of their town or something. I really didn't like it. It was also like, it was from the perspective of this girl who had just moved to town, and her dad had died, and her mom were getting along because she's kind of like angsty. The whole thing felt very cliched and like forced. It just really wasn't working for me. So I didn't love that. I won't be continuing with that. I only read the first issue, but it just wasn't for me. I did not complete the number 3 read a real life comic. I have a bunch that I want to read, but yeah, I just never got around to it. For challenge number 4, which was read a comic with LGBTQ plus representation, I had 2 I wanted to read. There was Motor Crush and Strangers in Paradise. I ended up reading Strangers in Paradise, which I kind of regret because I've heard great things about Motor Crush, and I wish I had read that instead. I read the first 3 issues of Strangers in Paradise, and it was about these 2 roommates, Francine and Kachu, I'm pretty sure, and it was kind of about how Francine ends up going through this breakup with her boyfriend, Freddie, I think. I didn't end up liking this one at all. I just felt like it kind of had some like not great stereotypes, where Kachu was like the lesbian who hated all men, and Francine was just kind of this weak woman who was obsessed with this guy who was kind of a douchebag, and she was just like begging him to stay with her. And I don't know, the whole thing I really didn't like any of the characters. I've heard it gets better. I guess it's like a classic, but I just didn't love it based on these 3 issues. So for challenge number 5, which is to read something with a fantastical journey, I started Pretty Deadly, and I got like 3 pages in and I DNF'd it. This was actually the day I got back from Toronto, and I really wasn't in the mood to read anything that I didn't want to read. So when I started it and immediately just like couldn't figure out what was going on, I was just like, screw it, I'm DNFing it and I'm moving on. I did that a couple times. With Pretty Deadly, it's a Western, and I don't know, it was like a bunny telling the story to a butterfly, and then the bunny gets his head blown off, and it was like, let me tell you the story of this girl, and then I was like, wait, no, let me tell you about this different girl. I didn't really understand what was happening, and I probably moved on too quickly, but I just didn't care. For number 6, read the first issue in a series that's new to you. I decided to read Fables, and oh my god, I love that so much. I know it's like a classic, so like everyone's probably read it before, but I have not. And I've read 18 issues now. I just love all of them. They're great. It's very much like Once Upon a Time or something, where it's all of the storybook characters, except they've been brought into our world. Well, they've kind of been run out of their storybook worlds and have had to take refuge in our world. And it's just fantastic, and I love it. I cannot wait to read more. Number 7 was read a new creator. I wanted to read Nancy Drew. I didn't get around to it. I'm probably going to read it whenever I have money again, so. I also did not complete the challenge of reading the webcomic. Challenge 9 was to read a comic from your favorite genre. So I don't have a favorite comic genre since I'm so new to this, but one of my favorite genres in general is like crime or mysteries or whatever, so I decided to pick up Abbott. The main character is like a journalist and she has to solve crimes. I DNF'd it only because, and this is literally the only reason, this is another one that I started after I got back from Toronto, and I was reading it on my phone, and it's a very like word heavy comic. Like there was a lot of text on the page and I was getting a headache trying to read it on my phone. So I'm still going back to it. I just couldn't do it that day, and that was, I'm pretty sure, like the last day of the readathon, so I was just like, I'm going to bed, I've got a headache, I'm done. I think I read like 10 pages of it and it looked good. I think it takes place in Detroit in, I'm not sure when, maybe the 60s or 70s. And it's from the perspective of a black female reporter, and she's kind of getting like gruff about the way that she, gruff, does that make sense? I don't know, she's getting, people are bitching because they're racist assholes basically, but like because she's showing all sides of the story, and she's not just blaming black people for like the crimes that are committed like the people who owned the newspaper want her to do. That's all I've gotten from like the 10 pages that I've read, so I'm very excited to read more on the tablet, not on my phone. Challenge number 10 was to read a house pick. I read Blackbird, which was Jesse's pick from over at Bow Ties and Books. I love their channel, and so I was like, alright, I should have some. It didn't look like my cup of tea, like that's not usually something I would pick up, because I'm not really into like supernatural things, I guess. I like things that take place in the real world. Obviously, some stuff is different. I mean, I read The Walking Dead and Fables and love them, so I should branch out more. Anyways, I read the first issue of Blackbird and I loved it. Like, I really wasn't expecting to, but it just, I don't know, it totally got me. I'm into it. I want to read more. I love the main character. Right away, she's super flawed, but I just immediately connected with her for some reason. The art style is beautiful. Probably my favorite art style like that I've read recently. Like, I love that it also talks about like addiction, and that's a thing. It's kind of about this character who sees this other like fantastical element in her world when she's a kid, but nobody believes her, and she becomes obsessed with it. And then when she's older, her sister gets taken away by this otherworldly element to this other world. But yeah, I definitely want to read more, so that was great. One of the bonus challenges that I also completed was to read a comic in a genre you normally wouldn't, which I decided to pick up Jessica Jones because honestly, superheroes aren't really something I would read, mostly because they overwhelm me. I don't know where to start. There's so many, and I'm just, it's too much. I want to be able to start with like number 1, but I don't think that's possible. I would have to spend the rest of my life reading comics. So I picked up Jessica Jones. I've seen the show, so like I knew a little bit about it, and I knew this was also one that like I could kind of handle because it's very like, she's one of the more grounded superheroes. So I read the first 6 issues because it was like a completed arc, and I actually really enjoyed it. I love Jessica Jones as a character. She's freaking great. I thought it was predictable in parts, like how it was gonna end, but I still really enjoyed it, and it made me want to read more like Marvel or just superhero comics in general, which I don't know how to do that. But I want to now, which sucks. Oh yeah, one other thing that I DNF'd was My Little Monster, which is a manga which is about a nerdy girl and this guy who's kind of like a loner at school, and he kind of takes a liking to her even though she just kind of wants to get rid of him and focus on school. I couldn't understand what was happening half the time, or like who was speaking, or why any of this was happening, and I just wasn't that into the characters. So I got like halfway through the first volume and I just kind of was like, moving on. So yeah, that was my experience with Panelathon. I had a really good time. This was great. I found so many new series that I want to read now, and that's kind of, I guess, the point of all this. So I had a good time, and I'm really enjoying my foray into comics and manga, and if anyone's got any recommendations for comics, mangas, anything, leave them down below, because I am looking for stuff now, because apparently this is like my life now. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll come back again next time. Bye.